Easy E, how are we?
Shawnee, the dry heat is gone and has been replaced by humidity. That mightn't
Is
sound
that
like a lot, but it makes a big difference.
I have no idea if you've gone out of the frying pan into the fire, or if that makes it better or worse. I don't know. I didn't do geography back in the day.
So there's a couple of things. The dry heat, your natural sweating works a little bit better because it's cooling you. It's evaporating off you. It has that cooling effect. With humidity, you walk outside and you're saturated. So there's so much water that the water isn't evaporating off your body. You're just getting wetter and hotter, and it's just like being in a steam room now. Instead of
So
being
it's
in the
worse.
sauna, I'm now in the steam room. Yeah. So, but with that, the temperature comes down a couple of degrees, I've noticed. So the temperatures have only been around 35, 36, maybe up to 39 maximum instead of into the 40s. So it's a little bit more tolerable. I actually prefer it because when you're running in the dry heat, your throat dries. Like
Right.
within 500 meters, it's dry. Whereas here, I don't get that with the humidity. So it's been a big change. So it's time now to turn my walk runs into runs, and the marathon training is going to kick off now. I'll try and get myself marathon fit by December, and there's a couple of good races out here. There's one race now. I don't know what participation level I'm going to have, but it's 90 kilometers, and you run from coast to coast, one coast of Qatar to the other coast.
Hold up. We've done ultras recently, and you're like, ultras are not my cup of tea. Are you telling me that you're going to do a 90-kilometer race?
So I've been offered. You can do it as part of a team, and I think you can have 7 people in a team, and they can only get 4 together. And what I said was, I'll do 3 legs, so I'll cover a marathon distance. And they said they'd let me know and they'll get back to me. But there's just something about saying I ran from one coast of Qatar to the other that's really enticing me. I'm not saying I'm
Absolutely.
going to do it. I'm not saying I'm going to do it. I'm going to be marathon fit. And if I do take it on, it'll be very much a walk, run, survive, and get across. Backyard ultra style for 90 kilometers and see how long it takes me. But yeah, I'll definitely do if they're happy to have me in the team, I'll do the 3 legs, maybe 35 kilometers of that and see how we go. It'll still be something cool to train for, and it'll get me up to some sort of fitness and then kind of give myself then 8 solid weeks. At that point, I'm going on holidays for 2 weeks or so, and that'll be a nice rest to then have a 7 week rebuild into Barcelona for a PB. So, yeah, there's some really interesting races out here. That was the first one. There's actually another race, right? Hear
Right.
this now.
I'm hearing it.
Only locals are allowed to do it. So you have to be Qatari to do this race.
But that ignores everyone on the podcast straight away. They just skip
Yeah,
forward to this week's guest. So hang on a
yeah,
second, pull it
yeah.
back.
But hold on. Now, this week's guest is extreme, and that's why I'm building here, right?
Right.
You start with a 4 kilometer swim, then you run 60 kilometers, then you bike, it could be 240 kilometers, then you kayak 7 kilometers, then you run another 40 kilometers, and then you do something else. So basically, you do a lap of Qatar. You have to be Qatari to do it. And if you finish it, they give you 12,500 euros.
Oh my God.
Now you're interested, aren't you?
Well, I'm not Qatari, so I'm only half interested. What, how, why, and why?
So they get 50,000 Qatari reals to just finish. Doesn't matter if you're first, second, or 151st. If you
Is there
finish
a
this
time
race,
on this? Like, is
I
there a
don't,
cutoff
I,
time?
I'm not certain on that. I have to look into that a little bit more. But one of the guys I was flying with, he was telling me about races in Qatar, and that's how I know about this. He was like, I would never do it. And I was like,
For
12
12
and
and
a
a
half
half?
thousand. But you see, these guys are so well paid. He's like, nah, that sounds like too hard a day. But yeah, 12,500. If you just finish it, that's all you have to do. Just finish the race, and they give you
Do
50,000
me a
Qatari
favor,
reals.
because the punchline messed me up there now. Go back to now that I know it's 12,500.
And
Explain what you have
you,
to do again for that.
you
Because
went and did a
I
backyard
heard
ultra for
Qatari.
free. In
I
fact, you
yeah,
paid to suffer.
I paid for B&Bs and everything for that one. I shut off when you said Qatari, and then you said fucking 12
See,
and a half thousand. I
I
was switching
knew it,
back on again. So
I knew it'd bring you
I have to do
back.
a swim though, don't I? No, I'll
You,
drown in an attempt to go 12,500.
I
I
tell
need
you
the
what,
money.
I'd say they'd probably let you wear armbands, Sean, and as long as you get out of that water and keep going, you will get your money if you were Qatari. But unfortunately, you're not. But yeah,
Oh, I could
it's
do it.
interesting. But there's races out here that are 5 and 10Ks, and like the winners are doing them in like 42 minutes and 43 minutes, and they're paying you like $1,000 to win the race. So I have a little. I'm not saying I'm going to win any races, but I'm going to get fit, and that's the plan. And these 10Ks and 5Ks they start happening September, October into November, and then most of the racing is November to February. So I'll be fit. And then I'll see what happens, And if I show up to a race and I'm
Mm.
running well, and the winning time is a 41 minute, and I have it, it'll be the proudest day in Qatar. I tell you that much. But yeah,
You
that's
get an
that's how
entire
I've
episode
been.
out there yourself in that one.
Yeah, so the marathon training is going to start tomorrow, and then we'll just see what happens, and we'll just pick up the races as they come, and I'll enjoy training through what's the winter here in 25, 26 degree heat, and yeah, we'll see how we go.
Marathon training to coast at the end of the year is what I heard. And that if I was Qatari, I'd get 12,500 for doing a race. They're the two
Yeah,
things I've taken away from that, Eric.
I've really my eyes are open to what's available out here, and again, sports, endurance sports, very much a developmental sport out here. It's not a big thing. 5 and 10Ks are people's endurance races out here. Like, it's pretty cool. And like we've had some phenomenal guests. Any one of our guests comes over here, they're the fittest person in the race. And
Hmm.
that's amazing. And it's for me to be going, do you know what? And this happened to me last year in Dubai. We did a trail run, and Monroe, it was with me there, finished third. He got all this gear, he got new shoes, he got this. And I was like, my God, I wish I was fit for today. And so
Yeah.
this is my way of saying I'm going to be fit through the running season here, and there's a couple of triathlons I might be able to pick up as well just to keep myself into it. But the goal is the marathon. We'll set a PB, and then I think I can leave that one alone if I can give a good effort at a PB, and then move back into triathlon. But yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. But I've also found this is another one, an air conditioned running track. There's 1.1 kilometers of a running track, and they blow air conditioned air at you while you're on the track.
Near you.
I've been pigging it out here in my little square, running laps like a zoo, like a bear in the zoo, walking around on the same patrol path. And yeah, about 15 kilometers away, there's an air conditioned running track. Brings the temperature down to about 22 while you're running.
Oh my God. That's it. That's you set for marathon training. I expect you not only do coast to coast, I expect you to win it. And I expect you to talk a full episode of the podcast and how you got like 12,500 for winning this one as well.
Oh, God knows what'll happen. But look, I don't know if I'll be ultra marathon fit, but it's tempting. The problem is I work, so I only get one day off. So if I do it on my day off, I'm in work tomorrow after 90K, which could be dangerous in itself. So yeah, we'll have a look. We'll have a look and see. But that's probably to give everything is about Ireland, and we've got great Irish athletes. But not this episode, and that's why I went on a tangent with Qatar, because there are different races around the world. There are different challenges. Some are a hell of a lot more scary than that, and that's why I've been thinking of it. So yeah, look, I don't know what it'll bring, but I am just going to get myself fit. I'm jealous of all the athletes we have front row seats. If I had their fitness and ability, I'd be having a great time this winter. And some of them have been doing really well, Sean.
Yeah, absolutely. Last week's guest, for example, Mary O'Donnell, she did 10 hours and 37 minutes doing the Ironman over the weekend in Sweden. Brilliant stuff. And while we recorded the intro to the podcast last week, that backyard ultra was still going on. It ended Monday morning at 7 o'clock with Wayne McGuigan doing 43 hours, 288 kilometers. Like, just there's two off the top of my head. Absolute bananas to pair them. Build a bus. Really, really cool stuff. Humbling stuff.
Yeah, and look, the reason why we went on a tangent about Qatar, and the reason why I've been looking at some of these crazy events around the world is because this week guest probably probably has put together a lot of the craziest events, or has participated in a lot of the craziest events I've ever heard. And it's absolutely amazing.
This is bananas, this week's episode, and the events they've done. I would not do it justice to explain them right now. So I'm going to go straight into the episode and let him explain himself. And this week's episode of the Any Given Run Day podcast. Let's go. So this week on the Any Given Run Day podcast, our next guest has the key to losing 8 to 9 kilo in 24 days while eating up to 6,000 calories a day. Sounds like your dream, Eric. Yeah, all you have to do this is come first overall in a 1,000 mile Iditarod Trail foot race across Alaska, something only 50 athletes have completed in the last 18 years history of the race. He is an extreme ultra runner, and when he's not running across the Arctic, he's rowing across the Atlantic or adventuring somewhere else on one of the 7 continents on this planet. Gavan Hennigan, welcome to this week's episode of the Any Given Run Day podcast. How are you getting on?
Great. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for the good intro.
So now hold on. The food though, how good is it when you're able to eat all that food over a couple of days?
Yeah, it's nice when you've got free reign. And yeah, you just eat whatever you want, really. Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
But how you carrying your food is the thing in Alaska. I know we'll get to this more detail later, but you're literally going across 1,000 mile, which is bananas to pretty much anyone listening. But you're dragging a sled with you with your food.
Yeah, I have a sled with everything you need in it. So all your food, and you don't bring everything with you. You go through villages and you pick up food along the way, and then you actually mail parcels ahead of time. So I had to mail out parcels to these villages with resupply,
Amazon next day delivery to the next village or something.
Yeah. There's a load of sleigh dogs just running off ahead of you with your food. So how do you go from being a regular guy in Ireland to, do you know what? I'm going to go across Alaska. Where did this all start for you?
Yeah, there was no regular guy to start with, unfortunately. So, I think I might have always been a bit touched. Yeah, it's kind of a hard one, obviously, going from I suppose, growing up in Ireland, to somewhere like Alaska. But again, it's because it's so unique and it's such a different place. Like that was, I suppose, attracted me because it is out of the norm, and obviously being in those sort of temperatures and that sort of landscape is such a world apart from like the west of Ireland. So, I suppose I've always been attracted to adventure and extremes in one way or another. And it was kind of a progression, I suppose, in terms of getting into running, outdoors, climbing, all sorts of stuff, and how I ended up here in Chamonix. And it's just been kind of one thing led to another. And like for me, the Iditarod Trail was the pinnacle of, a challenge, and yeah, it was sort of like the top thing that I saw maybe 8 years ago and sort of worked towards doing it.
And an 8-year journey, obviously, from the time you said, okay, I'm going to set my sights on that. What was the foundational level you had? Because we have a lot of athletes come on and they say, I played GAA, I never really played sport, I fell into running, and now I run 220 marathons. And what was your foundational level for sport to then go into ultras? And let's be honest, probably one of the hardest races that you can do.
Yeah, I mean, I was big in sport growing up. I was actually a swimmer, a competitive swimmer. And yeah, I was really into that. And then when I hit like 16, 17, I kind of went off the rails a bit and started drinking and using a lot of drugs. And like, I just have a very addictive personality. And I ended up, going seriously off the rails. And I was in rehab at 21 years old. And I got clean and sober then. And I've been clean and sober since, like, so over 20 years. So that kind of shaped my mentality in terms of like what I got up to with my life after that, because I was quite down on myself in terms of who I was and my self-esteem and self-confidence at a young age. I couldn't deal with the fact that I was gay. My dad was never around as a kid, and I had a lot of anger towards him. So there's all this stuff going on, and then obviously you throw alcohol and drugs on top of it, like with that sort of addictive personality, like you're it's going to be a bit of a shitstorm. So after I got sober, and I came out of rehab, I kind of got a second chance really at life, and I kind of vowed not to waste it really, and like a lot of people have slipped through the cracks over the years, and I've managed to, stay strong and not go back to that, because I think as an addict or an alcoholic, the most natural thing for them to do is to drink, and we all know people with drug and alcohol problems, but there's not that many people that that can stay off it, and like it doesn't really matter what, daft challenge I do or hard race I do. Like my number one achievement is like the fact that I haven't gone back drinking or using drugs, like, because I don't think I'd be alive today if I did,
When you came out of rehab, did you have people around you that in that kind of circle to bring you towards these races or runs, or was it like, I need a new circle to go towards
Yeah.
this?
Yeah, I had to start all over, I had to, unfortunately, the lads that I hung around with, I couldn't really hang around with them again. I had to start afresh, I remember at the time, I mean, we wasn't using phones for that many years at the time, but I got rid of my phone and I got a new number, and I had this like aftercare group that I did with the rehab, and then I was going to 12-step recovery meetings, so I started to associate with people who were on the same path, So yeah, that was really important, And yeah, it wasn't like I launched straight into doing adventure stuff. Like it took a while. Like I started surfing. That was my first kind of, I suppose, adventure sport, and got really into that. And then I after a couple of years sober, I went out to Australia, to work out there on a working holiday visa. I was 23 at the time. So, I didn't start doing like all this kind of adventure stuff till I was probably in my 30s, But then I got a job. Went to a training school to be a commercial diver, So I hadn't finished school. I had nothing really at 21. Like I hadn't learned how to drive. Like I'd, been in trouble with the law for drugs. Like, I had nothing going for me, and I had to like really start everything at 21, learn how to drive and just, do basic fucking human stuff, And yeah, like I was working on building sites, and then I went to Australia, and then I saw this course for commercial diving, so I went and did that, and that kind of led to my career, which kind of, kind of exploded my life in terms of like travel and stuff. I've been a commercial diver for 20 odd years now, working all around the world in oil and gas, and then I got into doing deep diving. So I've been a saturation diver for 15 years, which is a crazy weird world, which actually set me up for being kind of mentally tough in terms of like doing my challenges, because I have to live inside of a chamber for 28 days at a time under pressure to be able to dive to these depths, So yeah, it's been a bit of a roller coaster in terms of like that as well. Like I've had that career for all those years, and then it was like, yeah, maybe 10 odd years ago started to, I've been surfing and snowboarding and stuff like that, and then I just started looking at doing kind of more fitness stuff, So I was doing CrossFit and a bit of running and stuff like that. And then I started looking at like, very tough races and like what are the toughest races out there, and can I start getting to them, and I had a lot of cold weather experience from being in the mountains with snowboarding and stuff, and I'd done a bit of climbing, and I was just really attracted to these Arctic races. So I found out about these Arctic races, and the Iditarod was the one for me to be able to get invited to come and do the Iditarod, because it's an invitational race. And you have to do the 300-mile race, which I did in 2020, but then obviously with COVID and stuff, getting back there with work and yeah, injury and all sorts, it's a big commitment to go to Alaska, and the 1,000-mile race is like, yeah, you're looking at, obviously it took me 25 days, just under 25 days. So, it's a big commitment,
What's it
When you're looking at,
Go ahead,
sorry,
Harry.
Sam, when you're looking at yourself, like diving, obviously you're in the depths of water, you're in pure, it may be not total silence, but you're in your own head, and that's what you said has gotten you through a lot of these races, and it's building you up for these races. When you're coming up from that adrenaline rush, is that what brought you towards ultra marathons? Because from diving and water sports into ultra is a big change, and is it just the challenge that brought you there, that being on your own and the survival element that brought you there?
Yeah, I mean, diving, there's a lot to be drawn from that in terms of like, when I go into a chamber, like I'm going in for 28 days, and I'm going in with like, two other teammates, and then, you live in the chamber day in day out, and then you go down to the seafloor and diving bell, and you go to work for 6 to 8 hours a day. So like it's your mentality has to be that you're looking out for the other guy, and like you're constantly thinking of safety because if things go wrong, they go very wrong. Because there's no way of getting out. You have to decompress, and decompression can take, depending on the depth, like you're looking at an average of like 5 to 7 days, and that's like if you injure yourself, you can't get around it. So it's a pretty critical environment, like, and it is, easily one of the most dangerous jobs in the world. So my whole kind of like I've been doing that since my early 20s. My whole mentality is all about sort of like, I suppose, like being in scenarios where like I could basically die any minute or be in a serious situation, not to sound too dramatic, So I'm always constantly thinking of like what can possibly go wrong, how am I going to react? Like I'm always on high alert, and that's like what you need to be like for when you're in somewhere like Alaska in minus 45, is that you need to be on your game and thinking about like, what do I need to do now to stay safe? Like, and you can't really switch off. And like they're the environments and they're the scenarios that I kind of thrive in. And I think I think a lot of people can thrive in them, but like it's about putting yourself in the kind of frying pan as such, And that's kind of what I try to do with the stuff that I do, is that I look for something where I'm going to be, out there, figuring things out on my own and trying to survive on my own, or trying to like, kind of challenge myself in some sort of environment. Yeah.
What's the natural progression towards that? Obviously, you said it's an 8-year build. Did it start simply with a marathon? Did it start simply with, an ultra? Did you just go, I'm going to pick a heavy ultra race, I'm going to do this race? Or was it just a simple case of that's the plan and that's what I'm going for?
So the first race I did was the Likey 6633 in the Yukon, the Northwest Territories in Canada. And I kind of just emailed the organizer, Martin Like, out of curiosity, and told him a bit about my background. And he actually said, "You're perfect for this race." He said, like, the people who fail at this race are like the people who come from like the ultramarathon backgrounds. He said, like, because they don't, like, someone who does like a marathon, a 50 miler, 100 miler, like they might have a crew, and they have like, and they can, if they drop out of the race, they can get picked up pretty quickly. Like they're not really in a, an environment where they have to really rely too much on themselves. So like I had obviously the experience from diving, but I'd also a lot of backcountry travel through snowboarding. So I'd been to Alaska before. Like I was flown by bush plane out onto a glacier with a friend of mine, and we camped for a month, and we were splitboard mountaineering on peaks out there. So I a lot of experience, like, sort of beforehand. So your mom was like, I'll let you straight into this race. And so that was like I've never actually done a marathon. So I'm kind of coming down in distance, I found over the years.
Oh man, say that distance again. Your first, did you say 663?
So 6623 is the name of because that's where the race starts. That's the latitude, which is the Arctic Circle. So the race is 350 miles. So that was my first race. So yeah, like 570 odd K or something like that, or 550K.
I'm just doing the maths of 550 divided by 42 for the shits and giggles of I can't do it that fast for an answer. Yeah. That is ridiculous. That's like what, 13, 14 marathons. That's for your first.
Yeah.
How did the body hold up?
Not very well. Yeah. I mean, it was brutal. Like I was in bits. I was crying halfway through. I was like, yeah. I mean, it was an amazing experience to finish it, but I learned a lot. But yeah, it was my first time, and I hadn't really, I spent time in the backcountry snowboarding and stuff like that. I'd never pushed myself that hard, because I think I was 8.5 days. I was one of the last finishers, but I was just trying to get it done. I wasn't really racing it. I was just trying to finish it, and like not a lot of people finish that race. It's a tough race. It finishes on the banks of the Arctic, so it goes from Eagle Plains, which is just shy of the Arctic Circle, all the way up to Tuktoyaktuk, which is an Inuit village right on the Arctic Ocean. So it was, I mean, like, amazing place to visit, like outside of doing a race, So, to go there is just like, it was amazing,
What was the trend? Like,
Sean thinks he's great going to the Faro there on his holidays.
Yeah, when you talk about guys that ultra marathons that struggle doing 50, 100 mile, whatever, this is him. Like, I got carried through my first 100 mile recently, and like without my crew, not a hope. Knee was in bits, couldn't run for a month afterwards. And you're doing like 6 times the amount, and then you're you're also 28 days in these pods and stuff and obviously you're not getting training and stuff down there at the time either, like as in like on
No,
the body and
no.
stuff. So you do you have to go more all in, more intense training, or you like recovery?
Yeah.
How does that work?
So for me, all my stuff, all my expeditions, all my races, I've operated on because I get time off work. So I'll work, say, and then take a whole summer off or a whole winter off, and I do like a sort of 6 month build. Not like that'll be the most I do. I probably do it off 3 to 4 months, and I just do super intense. Like I get people contacting me saying, "Oh, I want to roll the Atlantic in like 2028. Like, what sort of training plan do you think I should do?" And I'm just like, man, I can't even think. I can barely think. You know what I mean? 6 months down the
Yeah.
line. So yeah, the idea of training for something for like a very long period, like 18 months, just I can't. Yeah, I wouldn't. I kind of like a concentrated effort where it's like every moment is geared towards training towards that, like and obviously my job allows me to do that because I work on and off. Like I'm not I don't have any distractions then when I'm off, and I can be fully focused on that next thing. So that whole thing, that whole lifestyle and kind of approach has worked for me on multiple occasions.
I can see more now why when you've only got a select period of time because you're working 6 months, that you're like, right, you kind of have to be, I'm assuming, like very selective in the challenge, because like I mentioned in the intro, you rode across the Atlantic, but that's not even doing it justice. Like you rode the Talisker Whisky Atlantic Challenge, which is seemingly the world's toughest rowing challenge to do. Like you didn't just row across the Atlantic. You literally picked the hardest one and went and did that. Like and you did it over Christmas as well. Like you went from
Yeah,
like December 14th to February 2nd.
yeah,
Rowing up to 19 hours a day, 5,000 kilometers in total,
yeah.
49 days. But once again, no question, just bananas. What was that like?
Yeah, a really unique experience. Yeah, I was 50 days, well, just under 50, 49 and something hours. I can't remember now. I should remember, but just under 50 days completely on my own in a boat going across the Atlantic. Yeah, that was a phenomenal experience. It's definitely I suppose, a marquee challenge, in terms of what I've done, but it took a lot of organizing. There's a lot of gear, obviously a boat, a lot of money, a lot of kit. Yeah, that was a bigger process. Now I did take a year off work for that, to train for that, and to go for that. That was a big build for that one, So that was that was after that Likey's race. So basically, I did the Likey's race in 2015, and then I was actually kind of a little bit kind of emotionally scarred after that race. Then it was like, after that, my mindset was like, Jesus, if I can do that, I can kind of do anything. And then the row idea came to me, and I kind of had signed up before I even had thought it through, So that was just, I suppose, like a byproduct of like when you do something, that you kind of complete that you think that you can't do.
Yeah.
Then you kind of, you get the confidence. And then I was, signed up for the row before I knew it. So,
Tell me this is not like the trail racing. You had at least, I don't know, rowed across a river or something before you took this up for the first time. I went 5,000. Feck it, I'm going all in.
well, technically, it was my first rowing race. So I've been in one rowing race. Yeah. But no, I did a ton of training. I got the boat. I had it in Galway, and I was training around the West Coast. And I did a lot of good prep, So I was very prepared for that. And I had a rowing machine in the living room where I was staying at the time, and I was rowing non-stop on there, and really prepared for that.
When you do something like that, like you pretty much have the world's toughest row ticked off across the Atlantic anyway. I don't know if there's any worse. Do you kind of just go rowing in a box, that's done, what's the next thing? Or is that something you go, I'd actually go back to that. Maybe there's a different rowing challenge somewhere else around the world.
Yeah, like I actually wanted to row back from New York to Ireland. I actually shipped the boat from Antigua in the Caribbean up to New York, and I had planned to row back. Yeah, I mean, this, like when we all finished the row, there was like 15 boats. Everybody got interviewed. Would you do that again? Would you do that again? Like everybody else said no. And I was like, yeah, I'm actually going to row back in like 3 months. I'm shipping the boat. I decided this on my way over because I was happy as a pig and shit out there. But I actually had a stress fracture in my back, so I couldn't do it. And then, then it's quite complicated, the North Atlantic. It would have been a bit kind of brash for me to just try and do it. It's very hard to do as a solo. It's quite complicated. But anyways, I had a stress fracture on my back from the row. And yeah, I ended up cancelling it. And then a couple of months later, some lads approached me about the boat because it was in New York and they wanted to buy it. And like there was no boats on the market and they offered me great money for it. So I kind of was like, the time has moved on here. So yeah, look,
There
I
goes my
would
rowing
consider
career.
rowing again. But it's a lot of organising, a lot of money and stuff. I mean, just, shipping the boat from Ireland down to La Gomera in the Canaries, and then you have to get it shipped back from bloody Antigua. Like it's crazy,
It's,
I can see why you wanted to row it back, save a fortune.
it's like connecting flight makes it cheaper somehow.
You make it sound
Yeah.
like you just went to Super Value for eggs. Sure, I'll just go back now.
Yeah.
So after that, then let's go back to this Alaska, the 1,000 mile.
Yeah.
18 people when you had done it. Only 8. This was a 30-day cutoff on it. Sorry, 30-day cutoff, 18 years, and only 50 athletes at this stage had
It's
done
more
it.
than that, actually. I think that
Now?
stat's wrong somewhere. It's more than 20
More
years.
since then.
I think it's close to 25 years, and I was the 27th athlete on foot to complete it.
Oh, okay.
And a few people finished since then. Obviously, this year, a few people finished. I think there's like 30. I think 32 or 33 have finished altogether in total now. So yeah, like it's some years nobody finishes because the sea ice breaks up when you're crossing Norton Bay Sound, and just the weather's really bad and the trail gets blown out. So it's if the conditions are good, then people can finish. If they're not, then nobody finishes. Yeah, and the COVID year, obviously nobody finished that year because they didn't let people come into villages.
Yeah.
So it's yeah.
So you're at the starting line, which is, I don't even know what a starting line that would look like, and you're thinking the next 30 days ahead. Like, is it just one day at a time? Whatever happens, because so many extremes. Like you're going now. This stat could be wrong as well. Like up to minus 40 degrees Celsius at times. Is it just like sometimes Mother Nature might just get in the way and this won't happen, or is it what's your approach to something like that?
Yeah, like the longest I'd done before that was 17 days across Lake Baikal in Siberia. So I did that solo expedition across Lake Baikal, and then that was more expedition style than race. Whereas this one was obviously 24 days, but before that I'd only done a kind of week, which is like a 300-mile distance, which takes about a week. So it was a new format in that sense. So I had to really, like usually you can do like a lot of sleep deprivation over a week, but once you go beyond a week, you can't push it, so you have to really like start to look after yourself and you have to try and recover a little bit. So yeah, I was kind of like, and my approach was, I just need to do sort of day to day and not really think too far ahead because, like I won it in 24 and a half days, and the cutoff is 30 days, and there's a couple of people that are finished on the 29th day. So you're already close to the cutoff. And if something goes wrong, you might make it. So yeah, you're just kind of I didn't even think about whether or not I was going to be able to finish until I was like 800 miles in, because I was just dealing with the here and now, which was just trying to keep the show on the road. I think when you're in those scenarios, it can be very hard to keep the mind and the body in the same place. You're when you're in pain and you're tired and you're hungry, your mind is obviously going ahead thinking, oh, when am I going to finish? When's the end? And you're constantly trying to draw yourself into the moment and into your body. And that was my goal going into this, was like, I'm just going to really try and focus on day to day and not be constantly wanting the end to come, because it was a bit like that in the Atlantic, and all of a sudden the time had passed and the whole thing was over, even though at the time it seemed really long. So my mindset changed a little bit over the years in terms of the adventures, and I kind of want to be more in the day or in the moment, not so much enjoying it, but just like kind of not, as I said, keeping the mind and the body in the same place,
On that first day, were the mind and the body in the same place? Like you've been in some dangerous situations. You live your life in a dangerous situation. Your vocation itself comes with inherent danger. Any part of you afraid of it? Any part of you a little bit apprehensive, or just like, oh, this is going to be rough? Do you feel any of that, or is it just let's just take it one step at a time?
Beforehand, yeah, for sure. It's the nerves building up, and like thinking, can I do it? Like I was, I've been worried about my body. Can my body cope with this? In some of the races I've done in the past, like I've had terrible swelling in my feet. So my feet would just turn into balloons. Like, and if I stop, and to go to sleep, I'd have to get them up. I'd have to wear compression socks most of the time. You know, I just suffer from it normally. If I go on a long haul flight, you know, I wouldn't take off my shoes and socks because I accumulate fluid there. So I was really worried about what was going to happen after like 7 or 8 days. And I had been kind of trying to mind myself initially in the first week and get some extra sleep. Anytime I was sleeping, I was getting my feet up. And on the 8th day, the swelling went down in my feet, like it came down a bit. And I just thought to myself, I can do it now. You know what I mean? Because I thought, you know, I was so worried about that. So yeah, like there's all those doubts there. But I think a lot of it does leave you when you start, because then it's kind of like you need to be fully locked in then, and in that sort of race mode, in that survival mode where you're like, you know, making good decisions about what you need to do. And like the interesting thing about the Iditarod thing is that it's the reason why it's an invitational is because there's no mandatory kit. Like, so there's no, like, obviously all the ultras, you know, that people do, like you have to have mandatory kit. Like a lot of these races here in the Alps, you know, they'll check you for kit. You know, you have to take X, Y, and Z. They have hot weather kit, cold weather kit, you know. Iditarod doesn't. There's no mandatory kit. All they require is you to have a spot tracker, and then you have to decide yourself. You know, they've selected you because they think you are going to be able to look after yourself in the Alaskan backcountry, and then you decide yourself on what you take, which is, it's a blessing in disguise because you can mull over like what you think you need and what you don't think you need, and then you can end up taking way too much extra there, and you can go the opposite way and take too little, you know. So that's a challenge in itself. But that's kind of what makes the Iditarod Trail super attractive in terms of, like, you know, you're still getting that race environment. You're getting a challenge in itself, you know, as in just be able to do that distance. And also, like, it's, you know, sort of it's been there for many, many years. So, you know, people can go and sort of, like, you know, test themselves against like people who've done it before, or like the actual distance, you know. So yeah, it's pretty cool in that sense.
This might sound like a very basic question, but I have to ask it because I'm genuinely wondering, and I've done survival training in the military side of things, never anything in the extreme you've done. What is a day like? You know, like we can talk about some of your good times and bad times, and we will get into that. But for everyone at home, what kind of kit do you have to carry? How far are you covering in a day? What's your daily routine in a race like this?
Yeah, so there's a few different strategies. Like, so okay, we'll just go for kit, for example. Like, I have a carbon Kevlar Hulk like sled, which is super lightweight, and in that I had, the main things I had was like a minus 46 degrees centigrade comfort rating sleeping bag. So that was kind of wouldn't be my heaviest bit of kit, but quite big. But I did compress it down. So I had a bivouac to go with that. So sleeping bag and the bivouac were together. Then I had an SR stove, and a spare pump for that. And then I had like all my extra clothes. I had like waders, because you can go through, surprisingly, there's a lot of water on the ice up there, because what happens is on the rivers and the lakes and stuff, the cracks can develop in the ice, and then water can get up through it, and then snow settles on top of it, and then it insulates it so it doesn't actually freeze underneath. So you need to bring like lightweight waders with you, because you can end up walking into water if you're not aware of it. And then I had all my food and stuff, you know. But like I was saying earlier on, I picked up food along the way, so I didn't have to. It wasn't like fully self-supported in the sense I had to bring everything with me. So my sled probably weighed, I don't know, like 30 kg, you know. And yeah, like in terms of strategy, then like there's a million ways to do it. But like I didn't actually have a great strategy to begin with. I kind of just said, look, I'm going to go, and just when I get tired, I'm going to go to sleep, you know. But there was this Danish guy, Asbjorn, who was bidding to be the first person to complete it on skis. So it was his third attempt to try and do the 1,000 miles on skis. Now, most people wrongly assume that skiing is easier than going on foot or on bike, because they're the three disciplines. But the trail itself is quite rough. Like, it's like, I'll just give you a bit of background in terms of the actual trail, because that's quite important. So the Iditarod Historic Trail starts just outside Anchorage and goes all the way to Nome, and it was established like nearly 100 years ago because there was an outbreak of dysphoria in a hospital in Nome, and they had to get a serum delivered across Alaska, and they did it via dog sled, and they linked up routes that were kind of already a little bit established between villages and stuff, and they linked that up the whole way across Alaska to get this serum. And it's a quite famous story. Like, they have a monument in Central Park, of all places, of Baltoro, which is one of the lead dogs in that dog sled team that, you know, got this serum and saved all these children. So from that, the Iditarod dog sled race was born, and that's been going on for close to 100 years as well, every year, and that runs while we're on the trail. And the Alaska there's very little roads in Alaska. Like there's a lot of villages all across Alaska, but there's very little roads, and everything's linked by bush plane. But in the winter, when all the rivers freeze and the lakes freeze and the marshes, covered in snow and freeze up, the trail is there, and people can go by snowmobile and by dog sled. And this trail gets developed, but it's only there for about maybe 8 weeks maximum, because it's not fully established. So there's 3 races to go on the trail. There's the Iron Dog, which is a snowmobile race that starts the week before us, and they go all the way, and they kind of put in the trail properly. And then we start the week after, bike, ski, and foot, and then the actual Iditarod dog sled race, which is kind of like the blue ribbon event. Like the human powered version is like it's very low key. Like it's a sideshow. Like people don't know about it. It's not. There's no fanfare. Like the actual Iditarod dog sled race is a massive thing in Alaska. It's a massive thing in America. Like there's huge fan following. There's like some of these towns you arrive in and they're there. There's like TV cameras and stuff like that. So. Yeah, it's a big deal, but they pass us, like we're already a week in, they pass us by, and then they're finished and gone from home by the time we finish. You know what I mean? It takes them less than 2 weeks, because obviously the dogs are like 16 dogs in each team, so yeah, so that's important there to give you that sort of background. Sorry, I've gone on there for a few minutes.
No, you're good. You're good.
And then obviously you have your human power. You are the human powered doggo bringing your 30-kilo sled.
I am the dog, yeah.
Do you take breaks and stuff? Is it setting up the bivvy every time? Do you ever get lazy and be like, oh, I won't take off my boots, I won't take off my socks? Are these kind of the things that are happening in your daily? Are you changing equipment often? Are you setting up camp often? Are you setting targets for yourself?
Yeah, so you're for me to be the most optimized, I had to try and sleep in the villages, because we'd be able to get into, they initially have checkpoints up until the 300-mile version of the race, because there's a lot of people to do that. So there's probably 120 people to start in total, and only like 35, 40 go on all the way to Nome, but it's fully kind of autonomous after that, so there's no checkpoints from the race organizers. Like we have to mail our packages ahead. If we get in trouble, we got to figure it out ourselves, but the villages are there, so every sort of, I'd say average 50 miles, but there are sections of like 100 well over 100 miles, 130, 140 miles where there isn't anything, but there are rescue backcountry cabins that you can get into. Like ideally, like you want to, for me, my strategy was to avoid sleeping outside like as much as possible. So I was always trying to get to like a village. When you get to the villages, they usually have the school hall open, so you can go in and sleep in the ground in the school hall. Some of the villages, there's people there that are kind of run a bit of a B&B, so you can go there and you pay them and you stay the night. They'll cook your breakfast. So they have another village. There was just a trail angel. There's someone's house that they have welcomed the racers in every year, and they're a family there, and they just give you food, and you sleep on the ground in their living room. So it's pretty cool. It's very unique in that sense. So yeah, like as I said, my strategy was not to avoid sleeping out as much as I can. I still sleep out plenty, but I was making big pushes to get to villages, sort of like up to 20-hour push at a time to get to like a cabin or to get to a village. And then I would I'd be able to dry my kit there and sleep there. When you come off the trail, like the snow was pretty deep, so if you are going to sleep off the trail, you have to put on your snowshoes and you have to pat down an area. Like it takes a while to get set up, because otherwise you're just going to sink into the snow. So you have to pat out stomp down a site to be able to set up your bivvy and stuff, But I had to do that a few nights, But like it's rough. Like when you're sleeping, like I woke up one morning at 3:00 in the morning. I was sleeping on the Yukon, and the Yukon is like one of the coldest parts. Like the cold air just settles right on the rivers there. And the Yukon, there's a section where you're on it for like 300 kilometers, and I had to sleep out on the Yukon one of the nights, and I woke up at 3 a.m. In my -46 bag, and I was cold, and I had to get up and get going then.
Whoa.
And yeah, it was scary. Like I just had to stuff everything in and just start moving as quickly as possible. Like we had a really, really cold year this year, where it was just kind of like a high pressure the nights were very, very long, very, very cold. Yeah, we got down to, I think it was, minus 45, minus 46, something like that.
How good does it feel then when you meet a trail angel who goes, "I've the fire lighting and a cup of tea here. Come on in."
Yeah. I mean, I remember you're making these pushes, to get to like a village, and invariably like you're kind of strung out right towards the end. And then you get to like this village and you're trying to figure out where this person's house is. And like I had a GPS on my phone, and you're just like, oh, get me in here, But like I always had this mindset when I arrived that I was just I'm gonna really enjoy this. Like I'm gonna just, because within a few hours you're back out on the trail and you're suffering again, and like you're kind of thinking, God, I didn't really, that went by too quick, So every time I was like, I'm really gonna savor this, and that was part of my strategy as well. Is that like I knew I wasn't thinking too far ahead. I was thinking, even though like, because when you're coming into like a village, say, and you've just gone a 50-mile push through the night, and you're run ragged, you can't comprehend going any further. But like I always remind myself, look, I'm going here now. I'm gonna eat. I'm gonna sleep for a few hours, and then I'm gonna feel better. I know I am. Like I'm gonna have that sort of little bit of recovery, and then I'm going to go again, So again, that all comes back to the stuff I was saying before about keeping the mind and the body in the same place. Because if you're in that ragged stage and you start thinking, oh God, I've got 600 miles to go, how am I going to make it? That's when your head can really go,
Were there any points in that early stages, and obviously you're going village to village, that you're just thinking, one, were there any scary points where you had to go, this could be life or death? Or were there any other little scary points where you're thinking, obviously you try and keep your mind and body in the same place, that you're thinking, this is a bad idea. What am I doing in Alaska?
And the first week was actually hectic because you're involved in the 300-mile race, 350-mile race. So there's a whole bunch of people in that, on ski, bike, and foot. And then I just kind of ended up in a bit of a race with two of the other guys that were doing the 1,000-mile, and one of them ended up dropping out through injury. And we were just kind of going head to head a little bit. And then there was another guy who was he just seemed to be kind of racing to try and keep up with me. I just was naturally moving a bit faster, but he was arriving at checkpoints, and I was already asleep. And he was telling, I think I heard him, one of the volunteers said, "Oh, that guy there said, can you, if when he sees me moving, to wake him, like, So he kind of came after me, sort of like kind of charging out of the checkpoint after me, like, to try and keep up with me. And then, but he just kind of kept coming. And there was a point after the 300-mile section where he passed me, and then I kind of passed him while he was sleeping on the trail. And then, like, I just kind of felt like he was kind of pushing the pace, and I was trying not to get sucked into a race. I was just, trying to remind myself that like it's a long way to go, and I don't know, like, if he goes ahead, that's fine, because I was in the lead at that point. But I kind of knew, I kind of could see what he was doing. He was being a little bit reckless in terms of like looking after himself. He wasn't really doing the, what I thought was the important stuff when I saw him at checkpoints and stuff like that. So he ended up dropping back eventually, and I did get a decent lead, But like, yeah, there was all that sort of craziness, with that, because obviously the race side of it is that, And then I spoke about this guy Asbjorn who was trying to ski it. We were both there in 2020 when he was trying to ski it for the first time, and then he failed it. And he was actually the first person to ski the full 1,000 miles and under the cutoff this year, which is crazy. Like, it was like, so that was a huge thing. But I ended up being with him a lot on the trail, and he asked me what my strategy was early on. And I said, look, I don't really have one. I said, what's your strategy? He said, well, I'm going to push really hard during the day and rest as much as I can at night. And I thought, like, that sounds like pretty good strategy. And then it just happened that we ended up being at a lot of checkpoints together. And I think about a couple of 100 miles in, there was one lodge that we got to, which is like a hunting and fishing lodge during the summer. And they have like cabins that you can rent, and like it was expensive. It was a few $100s each, but you get a breakfast and a dinner if you're there. And otherwise you're staying kind of in this walled tent with everyone else, So, and then after that, there's a big push over this pass, and there's a big long wilderness section where there's nothing. You're on your own for about another 120 miles before you get to the next village. And I said, look, he said, do you want to share a cabin? Like, and I was like I was kind of in this race with this other guy at the time, and I was kind of rising to the challenge a bit, but also like stopping myself, and but then as soon as Asbjorn said, look, I'm gonna spend the money and get this cabin. Do you want to go half someone? And I was like, that sounds like an amazing idea, you know? And I ended up kind of like forging a pretty strong bond with him throughout the race, because we ended up going pretty much the whole trail together. We were with each other a lot. Like, he was faster than me on skis, but I would do more hours on foot. So I would leave earlier in the morning. I'd usually leave at about 4 o'clock in the morning. He'd leave about 6 or 7 from wherever we were. And then he'd come past me during the day. And then I'd see him that evening in the cabin or at the checkpoint, wherever we were, you know? So that was a really cool experience to be with him and kind of develop that bond, you know? Quiet. Sorry, the dog's barking.
Did that help keep your mind in focus, knowing that I'm looking forward to seeing him now in 3 hours, and then there you go, and then it keeps you thinking for another hour,
look,
and then
I was always
you'll see each other tonight.
I was always looking back the trail, see we're going to catch up, you know. And then when he like, we're going to do it, it's like he was really trying to do, you know, something that hadn't been done before, you know, and which was finish it in under 30 days. And the problem with skiing is that I alluded to it earlier. The trail is quite rough because it has a lot of traffic in terms of like snowmobiles, the dog sleds, and it gets rutted out. So skiing it is quite tough. It's not a groomed trail, you know, like you see people doing cross country skiing on these groomed trails. It's not like that at all. So like there's points where it's actually too dangerous to ski downhill. They actually have to, the skiers have to take off their skis and walk downhill because it's like a kind of almost like a luge track, you know. And he was doing it without a sled. So like, you know, obviously I'd pull in a sled, but like skiing with a sled coming behind you, it's really tough. So what he did is he had a backpack, which is harder because you're carrying everything on your back, but he had to do everything like super lightweight. So he had like very, very little room for error. And yeah, so what happened to him is it was his third attempt, but 2 years ago he got before that he'd gotten to 800 miles, and he got a little bit further. But the second attempt he lost, got frostbite in his hand, and ended up losing half of his index finger. So he was back to do it with you know half of his index finger. Like people were like,
he was
crazy,
50 grams lighter.
There you go, exactly.
But it does highlight the reality that the risks of the game are the same for you, even though you're on foot. That these are the realities of the race you're taking on, and the dangers and what can happen when it's minus 45, and when you're pushing and racing, and other people are being a little bit reckless with probably their kit and equipment, they can find themselves in a lot of trouble very quickly.
Yeah. I mean, it's happened to a lot of people. There's been like when the race starts, it's just outside Anchorage, and it's during the day. It's like starts at 2 p.m. and it could be -5, -10, like nothing. And then that night you get onto one of the rivers, and like I was saying earlier about the cold, you know, so it can go down to like that night it could be -30, -40 easily, you know. So people get really caught out in the first 12 hours, you know. They go from, you know, a swing of like, you know, 30 degrees, and yeah, a lot of people have been taken out in the first day. Frostbite, you know, it happened this year. It happens every year, you know. So that's the main thing is frostbite, you know.
When you get to the finish line, I can only imagine, not only is it probably relief, I assume, the more so than you can see the finish lines of marathons and stuff like that, but also like you talk about survival mode. And I know I kind of joked a little bit at the start, but your body's literally in survival mode. Like you talk about afterwards, it was in starvation mode. Like you lost nearly 9 kilo in the space of a little over 3 weeks, you were saying. And then like, did the body just go when you knew it was done? Did it literally just shut down on you, and you don't, because you talk for like 3 weeks later, you put back on 12 kilo again, and that big swing, and somehow you're in Saudi and you've switched. That's an like 80-degree swing in the pendulum there. Like what's going on in your body there? Like, and how would you feel when you finished?
I mean, like I was kind of hanging on for dear life the last few days, you know. I was just wanting to sleep more and more. So there was I was in the lead, and there was 2 guys who were behind me, and they were a day behind me by probably about 750 miles in. They were a day behind me, but then ran into a load of weather crossing the sea ice, and I was held up in a cabin for an extra like 15 hours because of this wind, and my eyeballs nearly froze. it was minus 60 wind chill. It was a really, really chaotic situation. Like I was with Asbjorn in this school, and I got up at 5 a.m. to leave like I normally do, and he woke up to eat, and he saw the wind outside, and it had been building the day before, like as we were coming through, and he said to me, "I'm not going to leave today. Like this is the exact same spot that I got frostbite and lost my end of my finger a few years ago." And like that moment was like so heavy for me, because I was in a scenario where I kind of was like, yeah, like I'm taking this advice from him who's been here, and then but at the same time I was thinking, I if I want to win this thing, I need to push on, you know. So it was a tough decision to make, but I kind of knew there was a cabin. I think it was like 13 miles away, so I kind of said, right, it wasn't quite, it was on a spit of land, not quite out on the, fully exposed on the sea ice. So I kind of pushed to get to that, and then I got there, and my goggles had been, because I couldn't have any skin exposed, my goggles had been freezing up and I couldn't see out of them. And then I had to pull my balaclava to here, and like I had my cap down to there, and I had like a slit just to see out of, but my eyes were completely starting to freeze together. Like the eyelashes were completely frozen, and then I couldn't go any further. I had to come back to the cabin and try and wait it out, which I did, and then I eventually pushed through. And then after that, I would, like the two lads that were behind me, like one of the guys, his name is Beat, he's a Swiss guy, and it was his sixth finish. Like he's finished the race 6 times, which is mind blowing. Like just to do it once. And the other guy, another Swiss guy, he completed it once before. So these guys knew the trail, and I knew they were like machines, and they just kept going no matter what. So I lost time to them, and they were not that far behind me. Like they ended up being like 12 hours behind me by the end. So I was just, like I said, I was just hanging on for dear life at the end, because they were kind of getting more and more consistent, and I was was just on my last legs. I was kind of full zombie mode that last few days, and I was just like, every time I got to a cabin or a village, like I just didn't want to go back out. Like I just wanted to stay and sleep another 12 hours, and like I could have, let them catch me and kept, still finished in the time frame and taken the time. But I just obviously was like, fuck it, I've been in the lead like for, most of the race. I might as well just try and finish it out. So yeah, like as I said, by the time I got to finish on, I was absolutely done, and we had a really tough last 24 hours where like it was coming on the coast to Nome, and it was really, it actually had warmed up and it started raining at one point. Like it was horrible. So like it had stayed super cold most of the race, but then it got up to like 0 degrees and it was raining. I actually didn't have like a raincoat with me, like, because why would I bring a raincoat to last? I had a bit
all that Ireland training, and look at you now.
Exactly, yeah. I had an industrial bin liner because I might use them as waders. My waders broke, so I put that on like over my stuff and made holes in it, So I'm trucking along here in the last whatever 25, 30k with a like sideways rain, like in the west of Ireland, with a bloody bin liner on, just thinking to myself like, God, I can't wait for this to be over, because at that point, everything's soaked through. When I stopped, like there was no way I could have gone to sleep in my bivvy. Everything would have been just drenched. So I just had to I just had to do a massive push to get to the finish line. So it was such relief to finish, you know what I mean? Because like it was just such a stinger at the end, to be kind of kicked while you're down almost, but that was Alaska. Like, the environment doesn't give a shit, about you. And yeah, like I got the full experience out there, you know what I mean?
Is it the type of finish line you get to and there's nobody there and you just cross the line and go home, or how do you celebrate this kind of achievement, or how do they welcome you in?
It was cool because Nome is a decent sized town, and that's where the Iditarod finishes. But like I said, they're already that's all done and dusted, But they still have this archway in town that they leave up. The Iditarod Dodstead kind of archway. They have it on the main street where the actual race finished, and then they move it to like this park, So you actually go into town, you finish there. But there was a couple of locals who've been tracking me, and this woman Carol came out to meet me, and she walked me in the last 3k, which was really cool. And she was a local native woman who's into running, and hopefully she was hoping to do it one day. And then Asbjorn had finished ahead of me, and his wife and child had flown to Alaska to see him finish. So they were there, and they came out to see me as well, So it was actually really cool. And then the race director, Kyle, he was there at the end. He'd actually rented an Airbnb for a lot of the finishers, and that's where we stayed afterwards for a couple of days to kind of try and get our shit together. But so there was a little bit of and there was a few
Defrost.
random people who turned up, So I had an Irish flag, and I had zip tied it onto my ski pole, So I kind of had that in my mind as well, that I was going to be trucking down the main street with the Irish flag on my ski pole. I had that kind of I suppose image in my head about finishing from the get go, in the same way that I had like the image in my head when I was going to finish the Atlantic. Because when I finished the Atlantic, what you do is you rip off a flare, and which is like an emergency flare that you might need, but you set it off like as you come into English Harbour. And it's this kind of dramatic scene where you've got a flare going and stuff like that. So yeah, like same thing where I was like, had that vision, of the finish line that I had in my head, and yeah, it played out that way.
A lot of people cross the finish line to a marathon and go, I could have done that a bit quicker. I didn't give it my all. You've talked about guys who've done it 6 times and they're just machines. Have you any interest in going back again to set a record?
I don't know. There's a guy called Tim Hewitt who has the record there, and he's done the race 10 times, and his record is 19 days, and his pace was like it was about 50 miles a day, and I was doing 50 miles a day for the first few days, and like that was too much for me at the time. I kind of like almost like test, like I didn't say I was going to try and break his record, because I wasn't that audacious, but I just knew that I said to myself, oh, I wonder if that's a pace that I could handle, or I could do, and I couldn't. Like I had to back off after a few days, because I was in that race with those other guys, and also like I knew I just needed to mind myself better. So I'm actually going back next year to do the shorter race again, because they have a draw of the winners of the ski, bike, and run to a free place for next year. So I won that little draw. So I am come back to do the shorter race. I might be doing it on skis. I was thinking about doing it on skis, but I think I might do it on foot, because it's something I know. In terms of like records and stuff like that, you have to be really lucky with the weather. So your man Tim, who has the record, he got the right year. Like you can just have a horrible year in terms of like it could be snowing, you're in snowshoes, you're barely covering any distance. There's a lot of factors involved. Also, he's an absolute beast, and he had dialed it in over many years. So yeah, that marker's there, hopefully to be taken down by someone at some stage. So I don't know, we'll see. It's very, very stout. For like 24 days for me felt like it was fucking everything everything I could give at the time. You know what I mean? So yeah, we'll have to reevaluate at another point.
When you got your name came out of the draw, like to go through that again, did not part of you think, hang on, my eyeballs almost froze here? Like most of us listening have like, oh, I pulled a hammy doing this or something like that. But like, is there part of you, or was there any time during that race or any race where you went, I could have went a little bit too far here? Or does that even enter your mindset?
No, it hasn't really happened to me. It hasn't been really bad. Like I've not, you know what I mean? I've not got myself in a scenario where, I've taken it too far in terms of like I've gotten frostbite, or I've injured myself, but I mean, it's there. Like, I mean, if you're pushing the sleep deprivation, you can do some pretty stupid stuff and end up getting yourself in trouble. So like, yeah, like I'm not infallible, but I've managed to get away with, maybe I've just been lucky. I don't know. Like you were talking there about getting through 100 mile. Like I've DNF'd more 100-milers than I have like any of this longer crazy stuff. You know what it is like. Yeah. But yeah, in my mind, I suppose the thing is there's so much scope for learning in terms of like your equipment and how you manage yourself, just simple things like your feet, like foot management, like your layering systems, like you can always do better. Like there's always so much. Like in the first few days, like I just wasn't that efficient, but then I got like way more efficient in terms of like my gear and stuff. There was a time actually when I left a dry bag with some kit in it in one of the villages, and I had to go back up a massive hill to get it.
Oh
I was
no.
so angry at myself because
Jeez.
I dropped down this hill and went onto the Yukon River, and I'd gone a couple of Ks, and then I was like, hang on a minute, did I bring that little bag? And I looked to my sled and I was like, oh my God, it's not there. So I had to go back up, and I had to unhitch my sled and walk up this massive hill to go back to the little house we were staying in. And a local pulled up beside me in a car, and they said, what are you doing? I said, oh, I forgot something in the B&B. And he's like, oh, jump in the back, I'll give you a ride. And I was so tempted, but like, it just wouldn't, it wasn't the right thing to do,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I made the mistake. I needed to correct it myself, So yeah, so I was really angry at myself for probably a whole day after that, but I needed that lesson at the time to like kind of get me back, into a mode where I was like, because that's the challenging thing about it is, and what it makes it so interesting for me is that you have to be totally on your game in terms of, the things you're doing, like looking after your kit, administration and stuff like that. But at the same time, you're like pushed to your limits in terms of like physical capacity, mental capacity. So trying to like, operate in that fine, like, knife edge of decision making is it's challenging, but it's a really cool place to be when you can get things right.
Speaking of challenging and mountains there, are you running with Ricky Wynn at the moment in the Alps
Yes.
training towards a race? That would be equally exciting and terrifying. I did an 80K race before where I had done 30 and he was already looping to come back after doing 50 plus, and he was going faster going up the hill than I was going down the hill. That man's an absolute beast. How you find hanging out with him?
Yeah, it's tough work. I think I'm 20. I think I'm 25 kgs heavier than him. Ridiculous like that. So yeah, that tells you all you need to know. Yeah, I mean, going uphill, you need to be light, So no, yeah, he's in for TDS, which is a really really tough 100-miler here. So yeah, he's over for the month. So yeah, he's a good lad. So hopefully I'll go out with him for a few days again. But yeah, it's always going to be tough trying to keep up with him.
What a change from Alaska to the heat to run the mountains in the Alps. Like it's just phenomenal.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty fortunate. Like I don't, it's not lost on me, to have these opportunities and stuff, to be able to, to go to somewhere like Alaska. It's, I've been to a lot of places. Like it is the last frontier. There's just something about it, and that trail, that Iditarod Trail, it's very unique. You end up, you go through these villages that are, they don't see a lot of people, and you go through these abandoned old mining towns with all the mining kit that's been left there from 100 years ago, in the gold rush era. And you're going along the coastline and across the sea ice and stuff like that. It's just, it's definitely got an edge to it. It's phenomenal.
How do you top this? You're a guy who's looking for the next crazy idea. How, like, the Atlantic for a lot of people is that's it. I'm retired now. I'm not
Yeah.
crossing the road. I've crossed the Atlantic. You've done Alaska. You've done some crazy things. You've been at the depths. You're working in dangerous places. Where does it go from here?
Yeah, I suppose like I did have an attitude of like I think I was saying to you before, like, oh, I can kind of do anything now, and when you get the confidence from doing one or two big things, and then you want to like push the boat out, no pun intended, and sort of do the bigger and the next bigger and badder thing. And I don't really have, like, I kind of like I think for me in terms of like adventure races or like challenges, I still kind of see the rod for what I do has been one of the tougher, hardest things, I suppose. That's why some of those guys have gone back and done it again and again, because there isn't really anything beyond that, that gives you that autonomy and still for it to be a race. So I suppose I don't really, like I'm going to go back next year again. I'm going to do the shorter version. I think the 350 mile. Yeah, I haven't, like, in terms of like big kind of crazy expeditions. I went down the route of being a professional adventurer for a few years there. After the Atlantic, I was getting sponsors and doing public speaking and stuff like that. And I was sharing my story in terms of my background, being in rehab and motivating people and such, like, and at that time it was like, oh, I have to do the next bigger and badder thing because that's part of the brand, and like, I have to get sponsors, and there was a lot of social media and stuff like that. But I'm not doing that these days. I have a job and I do stuff because I want to do it. Like I'm not sponsored by anyone. I pay for the stuff myself. Alaska was not any way, shape, or form. I share what I want to share about it. I'm not trying to sell something on Instagram, or trying to get the next speaking gig, or anything like that. Like, so like I feel like I'm more authentic to myself, so yeah, like maybe there'll be something big that I'll dream up in a few years, but at the moment there's like zero pressure in terms of like what I need to do next, because a lot of the things, anytime I did something, it was like, I was like, oh, what are you doing? What are you next? And it was like, I have to try and top that now in some way. You know what I mean? I don't really care about that now. Like, I'll just do the things I want to do. Like, I'm happy enough to just go running the mountains here, chasing Ricky Wynn, and doing a race here in the Alps or whatever. It doesn't have to be, some crazy thing
Some
that people
crazy
think when I
adventure.
shoot, like, oh, when you go to climb Mount Everest, like I was, absolutely zero interest in doing something like that.
And is this a good phase of your life then? And that just content, you've pushed, you've taken on something that to a lot of people is impossible and still is impossible. And to have come through that and now to just be enjoying being active, being involved in sport, being involved in the variety of it and just enjoying this part of the journey.
Yeah, like it's, like I was saying before, like where I came from, like, all these challenges are obviously they're important to me personally. Like I like Alaska for me was like a very personal journey. Like I, had quite a few profound personal moments out there. Like, I cried a few times, and I normally wouldn't do that, because of the kind of environment I live in, and that's what it is day to day for us. So it was almost like a bit of a therapy in one sense, because you kind of become so stripped back in terms of like you just run ragged out there, and all the kind of like bravado slips away, like you, yeah, like you're not going out there to smash it. You're just like you're trying to survive, you're just trying to get through day by day, and like just not so much praying, but just trying to pass through the land, without getting run over by a moose or getting frostbite. So yeah, like it's and you do feel quite small, insignificant, and yeah, like so it is just it became more than just say, oh, the challenge where I was the 27 finisher. Like it's so much more than that. Like it has to have more substance to it, or else you're just not going to complete it. Like, because there has to be a deeper why, and like that's the fascination with Alaska, the sort of romanticism of adventure, the sort of like the delving into yourself out there. Like you spend so much time thinking about everything and anything that like you can't really escape it. And that's what it was like in the Atlantic. Like you're gonna face yourself and figure things out, like whether you like it or not. Like some memories are gonna come up, like, and you're gonna think about your family and you're thinking about your friends and stuff that went on in the past, and it's all gonna come up, like, and you're gonna have to, you end up working through it, because you're just day in, day out. Like you're not looking at your phone, you're not caught up in day-to-day life, so it's amazing. Like I kind of like, I wish people could experience it, and yeah, maybe they don't have to do as an extreme thing, a long hike, where they spend, a few days walking around Mont Blanc here, or some sort of challenge for themselves. I think it's kind of like felt like a kind of rite of passage in one sense for me,
So many people get caught up on what's fascinating about your story is even listening to you talk is kind of thinking about the things I worry about on a day-to-day basis. And already I'm like, well, yeah, I need to probably take some stock at what's stressing me and what's not. And is it actually stress? Is it self-perceived? Is it external pressures? And obviously you're going through that for a long time to process all of this. And everything becomes very relative very quickly, well over 24 days, and what's important in life. And I suppose that is something that you're privileged to experience, and it is something that I hope someday I'd experience as well, to get that kind of feeling of having to deal with me, which is probably bad. Sean hates dealing with me for 2 hours a week, so I imagine having to deal with myself. But it's an absolutely amazing story. We're so happy to have got the privilege to talk to you about it, and such a big race and a big moment in your life, and for being so honest, for sharing that story and what it's like to be on what we think is probably the toughest race in the world.
Yeah, I mean it definitely. Like I said, there isn't. I don't see a whole lot out there that tops that now. So speaking from experience, but yeah, no, it's no, like I love talking about it. Like it's great to like bring up the memories and stuff again, and share it, So yeah, like I don't probably don't push it out there enough, because like I say, my attitude is now just to kind of do the things for myself, but it is important to push to share the story like about my past and stuff and how it came, because at the end of the day, like when I was 16, like I couldn't have dreamt that I'd be doing stuff with this, and like I never would have thought I'd be, I didn't have any self-esteem or self-confidence growing up, and then to be able to to sort of do something with this now, it's light years from where I was, so that's really important, and I think people can definitely take some inspiration from that, I think.
Absolutely, Gavin. I'm literally blown away with that story. It's absolutely phenomenal what you've done there. I can't even comprehend, but anyone that's listening, just look at Gavin's Instagram page and just see, just like Alaska, you've pictures there where it's like the ice and all is over your face and it's frozen. And it looks like you've just stuck ice to your face. It just doesn't look real. Like as soon as you took a picture, the ice fell off. Like it's just banana stuff. But yeah, no, absolutely phenomenal. Listen to you, and your story is just very, very inspirational. I don't know how you're going to top this, but if you ever do top, we're definitely having you back at the podcast.
Better do something. Better do something good. So won't get back on.
That's the bar. That's the bar. It's the podcast. And that's it for this week's episode of the Hennigan Monday podcast. Myself, Gavin, and Eric. Take care.